Hello everyone, my name is Travis Buzzle, owner of Coast to Coast Studios and your host for Behind the Grams. Behind the Grams is a show where we dig into some of the stories, the motivations, and inspirations behind what we do as creators, artists, entrepreneurs, business owners, anyone in general chasing a dream. Welcome to Project Wisdom. This is a series of my show where I go to different senior assisted living centers and sit down with them one-on-one and just allow them to tell me their stories, their knowledge, their wisdom. I feel these people are remarkable and we can gain so much from just listening to them. So I hope that you guys enjoy this series as much as I do. Today we have Doris Fruman from Behindthegrams Living Center in Costa Mesa, California. She was born in 1930 in New York City. I'm not gonna say no more. I hope that you guys really enjoy this story. It's beautiful. Stay tuned. So we'll start with just your full name.
Doris Fruman.
Doris Fruman.
Yeah, my maiden name was Frankel.
Awesome. And you're from, where are you originally from?
New York.
New York, really?
Yeah.
Back on the East Coast where I'm from.
Yeah. Well,
Wow.
we lived for the first 12 years in the suburbs in New Rochelle, which is a nice place near New York.
Wow, that's amazing.
And it was a lovely place to live.
May I ask what year you were born?
Sure, you can ask. I don't have anything. 1930. I sound like I'm
1930.
calling in and saying this. You're my name, and 1930.
1930.
And you know what I tell people?
What do you tell people?
5 famous people were born on my birthday, and
Really?
they all look. What does that mean? The quintuplets.
Really?
Did you ever hear of them?
No, I
No,
didn't.
you see, it's before your time.
Yeah.
They were the first children, babies of that size that was ever born and survived.
Quintuplets, that's how many?
Quintuplets.
How many?
5.
5.
And
5
they
twins.
were, it was the biggest thing on radio and pictures, and so that's why I
Wow.
told everybody 5 people. And with the minute they're my age, they know I meant who but don't put it if it's not fun to you. Anyway, I lived, my mother and father, my father was in the furniture business, and
Okay.
he worked in New York, and he had to drive to New York. But then came the Depression, and it was too far to go. So I lived there. It was like a country, wonderful places.
Where in New York?
New Rochelle, that's what I say, for the first 11 years of my
Okay.
life.
Is that upstate?
No, it's a 25 minutes from Broadway.
Oh,
That's
really?
how it was close.
Oh, nice.
And it still is. It's a beautiful suburb of New York.
Wow.
And Westchester County was the place.
Okay.
And there are a lot of things there that everybody knew. It was
Yeah.
beautiful. And you were near Long Island Sound. You could go swimming. It was wonderful. And we lived in an apartment house, and there were a lot of young people there, and a lot of fun to play, and I was very much into sports. And I had 2 older brothers who were into sports, and we played sports.
Yeah.
And I played
What kind of sports did you do?
everything,
Yeah.
everything, including football when I was little.
Oh, there you go.
And basketball, no, that came later, and tennis, and anyway, I stuck with my brothers and had a lot of fun. And finally, I forgot how old I was. I have a very strict mother, and that's a whole story unto itself. My brothers went to my mother and said, Doris is saying bad words when I'm with all these boys. So she decided I was going to be too much of a
Tomboy?
tomboy.
Yep.
Thank you. So long since I've said that. That she took me out of doing all that, and she put me in school for the ballet school. I fell in love with it from the minute I walked through the door. I heard the music, I heard the dancing, and I loved it. And I had that for 2 years. I always have sports. I stayed with sports, but not all the time. And I didn't curse all the time like
Yeah.
the boys. And that changed my life because I've been very attached to all the arts ever since then.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And that was in New Rochelle. And the man used to be a ballet dancer. I think he had some kind of physical problem and he couldn't do it big style. But he and my brother were very close to him. He lived in New York and he took us into New York. And I'm sure he was gay, but I didn't at that time know.
Yeah.
Anyway, I learned about the ballet and music. And that was, this time I was about 11.
Okay.
And I had a great time with my brother, who was tall and handsome, and he danced. So he did just tapping, but I did ballet, tap, and toe.
Oh, okay.
So I got all those things. And with my brother, the guy who directed all this, he had every year there was a concert. And everybody played in it in one form or another. But every year, my brother and I danced together, and he did a special dance for us, and we were on the center stage.
Wow, that's amazing.
And that brother, Larry, was very close to me.
Yeah.
And I lost him this year, and I'm very, very, very deep. He was just going to be 90.
Oh, I'm really sorry to hear
And
that.
it's just terrible.
Yeah.
My older brother died a long time ago now from illness, and I wasn't as close to him. I loved him, but Larry was like this with me.
Yeah.
And you'll appreciate this, although it's way past the year of the time of the big bands.
Yeah.
Do you heard of those?
No, I don't.
Oh,
No? What is that? Big bands?
big bands. Yeah, they came
What year
in.
is this?
Well, it was in, I don't know, but it was, you've heard the names, I'm sure.
Yeah.
They led to, I'm sorry, you should know these. If
Yeah.
you don't, you should.
Yeah, I'll have to look it up. I'm
The big bands were the most popular thing all over the country.
Yeah.
And they were on the radio, they were in dances, they were, so I'll make a list of the names
Yeah,
for
I would love
sometime.
I would love to.
And my brother and I, every Saturday they had a contest. And everybody listened to find out who won for that week.
Oh, yeah.
And my brother Larry and I danced our feet off for those days. And it was all over the United States. I'm sure you've heard some of them.
Maybe.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So you
Anyway,
would sit near the radio and listen to CD.
that's right. And dance to it, and dance.
Oh, okay.
So anyway, we were very close, and everything was fine, except we had to move to New York for financial reasons. And we moved to New York and didn't have the lovely company that we had out in the farm. Not in the farm, it wasn't a farm, but it was just a beautiful place. Suburbs. And we went into New York, so it was a whole different world. And then we lived for 2 months
This was more in the city?
in the city,
Oh, okay.
in the Bronx,
Yeah.
in an apartment house, which was very different from a lovely.
And being back then, I can
That's right.
imagine
And
what it was like.
yeah,
This
and
was in the 40s?
yes,
Okay.
and my brother Alan went away to college,
Okay.
and so it was just my father and my mother, and
What high school did you go to? Or graduate?
not there. That you're getting ahead.
Okay.
Anyway, we were in New York. It's a whole different place there, as you know, as Boston would have been for you. And we started at PS. I started at PS 6. New York City had numbers on there. They didn't have a name.
Oh, really?
No, they didn't. They were PS 26 or 15 or whatever.
That
so
was for what?
for school, they had numbers.
Oh, interesting.
And I loved school right from day one. And so did Alan, my oldest. Larry was no good at it, but he was very, very handsome and charming and technically, and women loved him all the time. I only had one friend who didn't fall in love with him.
Yeah.
Anyway, we were only there for 2 years, but meanwhile, my parents were having marital problems. And so that was the beginning of a whole different section. And my mother was a very difficult woman, and my father was an angel. So, and he took us to the Dodgers and the Yankees and the Giants and the special
He was a big influence while you were in
Right.
sports.
He took us places all the time and was very loving and very sweet. So the next couple of years, then we finally moved downtown into Manhattan. And the divorce was getting closer and closer. So this was the roughest time of my life because they broke up. They got divorced. My mother went to, the only way you could get a divorce in that time,
Yeah, how was it back then?
you had to pay for it, and you had to go to
You had to go to marital court, or
yeah, but only in Mexico, not Mexico. Where's the you wouldn't know about all this anyway. The only place you could get a regular divorce was in no.
Phoenix?
Yeah, in the middle of
Like the town hall, or
no,
the city hall, or
no, it's in the famous Midwest place.
oh,
I can't think of it, but that was the only way you could get it, unless you did something naughty.
yeah.
And then you had to pay for it, and, you know. So my mother went to, I'm having a break. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So, but I had to decide which one I wanted to go with.
Oh, okay.
There was no doubt in my mind. My mother was very difficult.
Yeah.
And so I chose my father. And so I was starting in high school. That would be, I was in a private high school in New York. And I slept in his same apartment. And it was just the two of us, and it was very fine. I used to go to high school and come home and cook his dinner.
Wow.
And he was loving and sweet. We'd go to the movies together, so that was fine. And meanwhile, my mother got involved with a wonderful man who was Dutch and I won't go into his side of it, but I loved him too, so I couldn't call him father, though. I called him Pops.
Okay.
I kept my father as dad.
Yeah.
I got a lot more that's interesting, but those are for my years.
Yeah, I want to hear it all.
You're going to get it.
Awesome. I look forward to it.
Anyway, my stepfather and I were like this. The witch wasn't. She managed to decide that I don't have to go to college. Women don't have to go to college. They just have to look pretty. That's what she said. I mean, how could I even talk to him? I was already a good student. I wanted to go to college. I wanted to be smart. And my father was just too weak. He just was a very dear man. Everybody loved him, but he just didn't know how to handle it. So finally, this is the movie part. My father got the idea that I should go down and stay with her daughter, who had little children, and I could babysit them. And the mother didn't mind. And that's what I did. So I had 1 year at the University of Florida. So I went to the University of Florida, which people would say is a junky place, but it wasn't. It was all right. But it happened that the woman who had the two little children, her husband had to get another job, and so I had to leave there and I had to go back. And that was the worst time of my life, because I was back with my father and my great stepmother, and she made life hell for me.
Yeah.
But finally, and that I won't go into, it was very painful.
Yeah.
So finally, I went to live with my mother and Martin, my stepfather. And they were about to move to California because he got a job there. He was a very good engineer. And so that's where I went next. I moved to California, and I had a little time there. Everything was okay. And my mother never got easy, but she wasn't as bad.
As your stepmother?
Yeah.
Was it a little
No, and she
difficult?
wasn't as bad as she was. My mother was very strict and
Yeah.
very demanding and scared me, all of us. That was the saddest part.
Yeah. How was it leaving your father back in New York while you
Well, we kept in touch. We always kept in touch.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when he was dying, he could no longer really speak, but whenever I came to see him, he said, Sugar. He called me Sugar.
Oh, yeah.
And we were like this, you
That's
know.
amazing.
And when we were still living together, we'd go to the movies together and we'd hold hands, and he would take me places. He'd take me dancing. He was a very good dancer.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
right.
amazing.
So he was wonderful,
I
but
feel like this generation, the relationship isn't that close, you know what I mean?
yeah, no, that's true.
Yeah.
But so I never lost him, except I moved to California, and I didn't see him, but I did when I came back to New York.
Mm-hmm. Did you have to write? You obviously have to
I
write
wrote to
letters,
him all the time.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And as I say, because my mother wasn't happy in her first marriage, and she did like her second, she had some good years too. So those were only a few.
Yeah.
And that's another story.
So you moved here to California with your mother and your stepdad?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's right. And so then I got a teaching job here, and I was happy. I was here about 2 years, but then I wanted to go back to New York because my father was very ill and dying, and my best friend, and that's another long story, I'm not going to tell you. Anyway.
Maybe next time. Maybe next time.
Yes. Had a terrible disease, and I loved her to pieces. She and I were best friends in high school and went on to have high hopes in college, and she did too, and everything. So I did go back, and what I didn't want to leave here because I enjoyed teaching here, and I loved teaching from day one.
Yeah.
And although I have to tell you a cute story.
What did you start teaching? When you first
Here
started?
in Torrance.
What did you teach?
That was elementary school.
Oh, okay.
It was fifth grade.
Oh, nice.
And then the next year I taught sixth grade.
Mm-hmm.
But they had to teach everything. It was crazy.
Oh, it wasn't just one subject.
No. And I had to teach art. Now, what did I know about art? So anyway, and you had the class period, math, this. So we had to teach math, drawing.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then the bell rings and you have to change to something else.
Oh, really? So you would stay in the same classroom?
Oh, yes. And when the bell rang for the end of the period with art, everybody had to put everything away. So these were fifth graders, I guess. So they came up and they said, my name was Frankel, as I told you. Where shall I put this, Miss Frankel? And I said, put it in the drawer. And he's looking at me and looking at me and looking at me. And we were rushing, and he said, where shall I put it? And like looking at me like this. Mm-hmm. And I just kept up because I was busy. And I said, just put it in the drawer. You get what's funny?
What?
The drawer. I was from New York.
Oh, so he didn't know.
He didn't know what a drawer was.
Oh, yeah. I didn't recognize it because I'm from Boston.
That's
so
right. You probably heard it that way too.
Or a bureau.
Yeah.
Oh, dresser bureau, but yeah.
Yeah. Anyway.
So he was thinking draw.
Yeah. I now say drawer.
That's funny.
So, but I loved it. And then I came back to New York. I wanted to teach again. So I went back to the high school I went to, which I was very good at and loved. And I got a job as a seventh grade teacher.
Okay.
And it was a small college, high school. And I was going to get a master's degree in English literature. That was my big love from school on. Mm-hmm. And the school was small, and the teachers were all very friendly. And one of them, the English teacher, gave a big party at the end of the year for all the teachers. Mm-hmm. And there was a woman doing a student teaching thing for the history teacher in that place. Mm-hmm. And so I was talking to her when we went to this big party, and I was telling her I was thinking of changing from Hunter College, not Hunter, I did go to Hunter, that's where I got my BA, to Columbia.
Okay.
And I had gone for a summer, and it was good, but it was boring, but it was cold. So I knew that her boyfriend was at NYU. And I said, well, what does your friend say about it? She said, well, Doris, that's no good because, you know, you're in English and he's in something else.
Yeah.
He's in English, she said. In any case, she said, let me introduce you to Norman. He's been in both Columbia and NYU.
Oh, okay.
So I had a new dress on. They gave me something to drink, and I'm very soft-headed. And she took me across the room and said, this is Norman. And she didn't say my boyfriend, so I thought he wasn't a boyfriend or anything. And he looked at me, just as close as you are right now. And he said, why do you want to get a master's degree in English literature? And I liked the looks of him, and I wanted to impress him, and I was a little drunk. And so I said, you know, I love English, and I love them, and I tried to make them myself very interesting. And he looked at me, and this is the thing that's in our family now. He looked at me, and he looked at me, and then he said, you'll never get married. And you probably don't understand why that had some meaning. Because that was before the Women's League. Oh, okay. There were no Me Too's of that time, you know? That's true, yeah. And so I talked some more, and he talked some more, and I talked some more, and he took my phone number. This is the interesting part. Yeah. And I went home, and I had one of my dear friends who lived with me, and I said, I met a really interesting guy, and it was the first guy I'd met, and I don't know how long that was good and interesting. And I hope I hear from him. This was June 15th. Oh. Well, June came and went.
What?
Pardon?
What year was it?
I don't know. I don't remember.
Around the 50s?
Yeah, later, a little later than that. Right. And I was disappointed. But a friend of ours, I don't think you know this part of New York, there's a big island off of Brooklyn called Fire Island, which is quite famous over there. And it's a place special because you have to walk. There's no such thing as driving. Yeah. And you take a ferry over there or a boat.
Do they have a big museum over there?
No. But people have houses there because it's a island, a giant island where you can go on this side, get the ocean, or this side, you know. So this friend lent us this house, and the first night we were there, we took a long walk, which is what it did, that place. And I saw the house, the building that was a place for people to come and socialize. And we walk in, and I look. And at the door, not in the door, on the right of the where do you drink?
At the bar.
At the bar, there's Norman sitting there with a guy. And I don't know, I had such a strong feeling maybe from that day. I walked right up to him and I said, hi, Norman, do you remember me? Yeah. And he said, oh my God, yes.
So he was teaching?
He wasn't teaching yet, he was learning. He was getting a PhD so that he could teach.
And you were teaching?
And I was teaching.
So he was really busy and you were busy?
Oh yeah, he was busy all the time finishing. And we saw each other all the time, and we did all the things together that we both loved, in the arts and the museums and the everything. And so that was very close. Wow. And he had a discovery. Oh, he had two things happen during that time. They found him out from somebody else during the quiz period, and he was asked to participate in one of those. And he did extremely well. And our engagement was announced on television.
Wow.
Yeah, and all the family came and the friends came, and then we had a party afterwards. And he did a very good job. I think he earned almost $800,000. Wow. It was a lot of money then. Yeah. Oh, but they got rid of him because he was too smart. So the questions kept getting harder and harder. But it didn't matter because it gave him credit. and then other people heard about him. And so we were engaged by this time. And another year later, we got married. And in the meantime, he was offered a job from Cal State, LA. And they called him on the phone because they'd heard about him because of his big discovery. And so that made him famous. And so he got known by somebody out here, and they offered him a job at Cal State. And at this time, we'd been married for quite a while, and then we moved out here. And then I got pregnant, and that's some fun thing I can tell you about too. I was pregnant by this time, and I went to, I forget where it was, Pasadena, and I went to teach in a junior high school. And it was the hardest teaching job I ever had. 2 hours of English. Okay, I spoke English, I knew English, that's not so bad. 2 hours of American history. Well, those books were easy, you know, but still you had to get these across to kids. And then I said I was able to teach one class of French. And that was fine, but that wasn't all that was hard. They had a special after-class class for the bright 8th graders. And I said, okay, I'll try it. I mean, we had already been to France, and I had done a lot of interest with French even then. Anyway, but I was quite pregnant, and you know, I had a big belly, and I wasn't allowed to teach anything with writing. So you could motion. So I had to teach, for instance, winter skating. Yeah. So I would do this, and there's my big belly, you know, and I'd say your name again?
Travis.
Chaus?
Travis.
Travis, I'm sorry. I won't forget next time. Travis, fais du ski, you know, and they're all looking at my belly, you know, these 8th graders, you know, and then Travis patins sur le lac, you know, and so that went fine. It was hard, but it went fine. The next time, it was animals. So I called the person at the to take care of the books, and I said, do you have any large pictures of animals? And she said, yes, I'll send it to you. So they sent it the day that I had to do it. This was all after school, mind you. And I get it, and it's more and more animals that you find, like a circus. And right smack on the little is a pool with a seal, the American seal. And I thought, oh my God, what am I going to do now? And these smart Alice kids. So I said, I'm not going to do this, because the word for in French for seal is fuck. Oh, no. So I managed to get every animal that I could possibly get, and it was time to go. So that's the experience I had, and it was wonderful, but it was very trying, and all those other things I had to prepare.
That's amazing that teachers were expected to be knowledgeable in all the subjects instead of just focusing on one subject, and the kids move to classroom to classroom to the teachers instead of the teachers kind of put it
You're right. And you know, I was very lucky because, I don't know, when you're 15, 20 years later, I bumped into a woman and she looked familiar to me. I was at the market, and she said, Mrs. Fruman? I said, yes. And she said, and then she told me who she was. She had been a student in my English class who was struggling, and she had risen above it, gotten good grades, gone to college, had a good degree. She was so thrilled to see me. So that was worth it.
Must have been a lot of fulfillment knowing that you kind of helped her
Right.
find her way in life.
So that's why I decided I was a good teacher, and I kept on, and I did the best time I had. You know, this could tell you a long time. I don't know if you want. A friend of mine was teaching at a continuation high school in Alhambra, and she wanted to go to another job, and she said, "Doris, why don't you do it?" And I said, "Are you kidding? Are you crazy? I've got 3 little kids. They're going to go to those kids who are into drugs and into terrible fights and all that." I said, you know, she says, "Come and look." So I went down there, and it was a special place, and I walked through the door, and there were about 5 different tables and students at them, and they were quiet. They weren't making any trouble. But one of them was as far away as you are, and twice as large, had bright red hair and beard. And I thought, oh my God, if he's a crazy guy, he's going to kill me. And he turned out to be the king in all the plays we put on, which we did for the elementary school. So that's what started for 5 years. I taught that and taught lots of things and got to know these kids, and it was a wonderful experience.
I feel like you made a big impact in a lot of their lives.
I think absolutely. And they called me Doris. And one funny thing, the first year, there was a guy named, I forgot what his name was. It was a French name, but he wasn't French. And we were talking, just conversing. And there was some article in the paper about some Jewish guy who'd gotten into a lot of trouble. And he said to me, well, it doesn't matter, all those Jews are rich. And he didn't know me. And I said, why do you say that? I said, I'm Jewish and I'm not rich. And he said, I can't help it if you're not as smart as the others. So I had to deal with this kind of thing. But he had trouble doing it. To be in that school, you had to gain points. They didn't teach a whole class room full of the same thing. You had to do some. And what he did, he didn't want to do the playing, but he agreed to be the announcer off at the edge. So he did that, and so that was fun. So that's the kind of thing for 5 years, and it was all wonderful.
Yeah, and that was in Pasadena.
I was in Pasadena.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing.
And then there's another boy who got into trouble all the time, but he was in all the plays. And he graduated, and that was a big thing because not everybody graduated.
Yeah.
And then he came back one day to visit, and he was in a school of his own volition.
Yeah.
And he said, Doris, you don't know diddly about, what did he say? Not teaching. It was something about not teaching, knowing what to tell people.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, that's because he didn't have to have you as a student, because he was trouble. But it was 5 years of just feeling very, very special.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you're helping a lot of kids that were in troubled times. And
Yeah, they were. The gang business was terrible.
oh yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah,
Being in New York also back then,
that's right.
Al Capone, all that going on. I can imagine Wayne Bulger also in Boston, you know.
Yes.
after The Winter Hill game.
Anyway, I've carried too far. I've got a lot of other things, but I don't think you want to hear all of it today.
Yeah.
One day. But eventually we left there because my husband was already well known in his field, and he went to teach at Minnesota.
Oh, okay.
And we took our kids. And I haven't told you the interesting stuff that was all about.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Oh, I don't think I have enough energy.
Okay.
Can you save me for another day?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I'd like to tell you what happened when I had the children and we went traveling with them. And we had a wonderful time, and people would say, how can you take the kids away for a whole year, whole school year? They had a wonderful time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we had a wonderful time.
And you homeschooled them? Did you homeschool?
Homeschool?
Yeah.
But no.
When
They
you
came
traveled?
home and they were You know, David came home from, and he was good, he got both kindergarten and first grade, he was so far, and French.
Oh, wow.
You know, so it was wonderful. And they loved it, and they still do. And their children now know French. So it was something we passed on.
That's amazing. It's amazing.
So this is why I'm bragging, you see, about my life has been full.
I love it.
Do you?
It's amazing.
Thank you.
Boy, your passion about teaching has carried throughout your whole life.
It has, it
I'm
has.
glad to see that you pursued that all your life.
Well, I'm sorry I didn't get you as a student. I would have liked that.
That's okay. Well, I'm a student right now. Right
Okay.
now I'm learning.
Well,
I'm retaining. You're teaching all of us a lot.
yeah.
That's amazing. I have a couple questions for you. What is your perception of living life to the fullest? What does life mean to you?
I feel I've been blessed.
Mm-hmm.
I had rough times, the times with the divorce and my mother's strictness. But I went here, I went there, I had a wonderful marriage altogether.
Mm-hmm.
And how many people can claim that? And all three of my children are precious.
Absolutely.
And they're I'll tell you about them too. So
Yeah.
sometime.
What does your children do?
Well, there are three. Jessica's the oldest, and she's almost 50. She doesn't like to admit it. And she's a very, very successful businesswoman.
Wow.
She got an MA in business, and she is a what's the word? She consults
Okay.
big shots,
Mm-hmm.
big shots. You know, CEOs of different companies. Right now, she's doing 3 movie companies.
Wow.
And she's wonderful. And she's just a dream for me. She does everything she does, takes care of my money. I don't have any right, I don't have any ability to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And she is there for me every time I need her, and she's,
Not a lot of people, not everyone has that.
no, she, unfortunately, her marriage didn't work out, but she has a son who's now 28,
Yeah.
and he's going to law school.
Wow.
He hasn't started, but he's going to.
Mm-hmm. And that's your grandson.
And that's her son.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And then comes Sarah, who has an MA in journalism, and she's a journalist, and she works for NBC.
Wow.
And she's got an MA also. And David is the youngest and the smartest. He's a doctor.
Wow.
He's a professor at UCI. He teaches how he's an expert in cancer.
Wow.
And they're all wonderful.
That's amazing. Thank you for your time. We can do another session.
I don't mind.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more.
Yeah, I think you'd like to hear more about our experiences abroad.
Mm-hmm. Traveling abroad.
Channeling abroad? No, we lived out of, Norman had 3 bullflights. Fulbrights.
Yeah.
Those were given to professors after World War II as a reward for fighting in Europe.
Oh yeah.
And he had it the first time, we had it in Israel, the second time in France, and the third time in France. And all that time they paid for it. And the kids came with us, and, you know, that was very incredible.
That's amazing. And Norman was the one in the picture.
Yeah.
That you showed me. And so before you met, before he started doing his PhD, he was held captured.
Yes.
That was
After the war, I mean, you know, it was right near the end. The Battle of the Bulge was like the last 5 months of the war.
Mm-hmm.
He was lucky he didn't get killed.
That's amazing. That's
Yeah.
an amazing story. I'd love to listen to that whole story also, or as much as
No,
you.
it's wonderful,
Yeah.
his story.
Mm-hmm.
He was wonderful. See, I
Yeah.
really miss him.
Well, he was married to you, so I imagine that
Oh.
he had to be pretty wonderful.
You could join the family.
Yeah,
And I'd
thank
like you to meet my wonderful kids, because I think they'd like you too.
I would love to.
Okay.
Let's do this again. I'd love to sit down and hear more about you.
Yeah.
I know it's a lot to